I thought uncovering the truth would bring redemption, but the truth turned out crueler than the lie. When the so-called blood was a hoax, and it already plunged my blade into my own kind. Could I bear the truth? Chapter 82. The unnamed narrator gripped the steering wheel of the massive SUV, her anxious eyes scanning the inky darkness of British Columbian night. Ryder, usually the one in charge, had relinquished his role as driver, opting to occupy the passenger seat instead. She encouraged him to rest, acutely aware that their impending confrontation would demand every ounce of their energy and focus. The GPS display glowed ominously, a stark reminder of the gravity of their mission. Ryder fiddled with his phone for a while before crossing his arms and closing his eyes, his face etched with worry even in repose. A part of her yearned for this to be nothing more than an impulsive road trip, a spontaneous adventure born from a late night at work. She imagined them as just another young couple, embarking on a romantic getaway filled with fine dining and carefree laughter. But reality weighed heavily on her shoulders, crushing such fleeting fantasies. Her detail-oriented mind couldn't help but catalog every potential danger lurking in the shadows. 7 hours stretched before them, a daunting expanse of time filled with both dread and anticipation. This journey would bring an end to their ordeal, one way or another. The narrator clung to the hope that once this was over, perhaps her dreams of normalcy could finally materialize. Her cautious nature, however, reminded her of the countless obstacles they still faced, but between now and then lay hundreds of kilometers of treacherous terrain. The nighttime landscape was unforgiving, especially along these isolated stretches of highway. Towering mountains loomed on either side, their silhouettes barely visible against the star-studded sky. Thick forests pressed close to the road, concealing potential dangers. A moment's distraction could send them careening off a cliff, into a rocky outcropping, or into the path of a wandering moose. The narrator forced her eyes to focus on the yellow and white lines guiding their path, but her mind refused to be tamed. Thoughts of their impending confrontation with Ajax and Keiko swirled relentlessly. They were hurtling towards incredibly powerful beings, entities capable of manipulating reality itself. The very people she once thought she was fighting for had deceived her, shattering her perception of the world. As she drove on, the weight of her role as the female protagonist in this unfolding drama pressed down upon her, reminding her of the responsibility she carried not just for herself, but for Ryder and potentially many others. Unanswered questions plagued me. Was I truly poisoned by an alchemist, if Ajax and Keiko weren't responsible for the alchemist's disappearance? What had become of these masters of potions? The weight of our decision to leave a note for Noah and entrust copies of the evidence to Milo pressed upon me. We were taking an enormous risk, and the potential consequences loomed large in the darkness surrounding us. And what would have happened to me if they had found the alchemist before I had drank the elixir? Was there a chance? Could I have still been mated to Ryder if I had said so and just waited a while longer? The man in question jerked awake when I slammed on the brakes, catching the movement of a deer just before she decided to bound across the highway. "You good," he said groggily, rubbing his eye with the back of his fist. I was falling apart. I was tearing at the seams and felt like I had been for some time. "Yeah, I'm good. You should go back to sleep if you can." Ryder attempted this for a little while, eyed closing then opening again when he felt the car shift with a turn or slow for a stop sign. Eventually, he gave up. "This is insane. I can't believe that." "You know what? I can believe it. I can believe that fairies would have their fucking fingers in this. They've always been pieces of shit and they've always hated werewolves. We don't know anything for sure." I pointed out, which was true. There were a lot of arrows pointing to the people I had trusted for so long, but the connections didn't make sense. "They'll tell us," Ryder said flatly. "They are incapable of lying if you aren't under their glamour. Even then, it's difficult for them, especially to other magical creatures." I cleared my throat, feeling a little cowardly, but my self-preservation refused to let me remain silent. "What do you realistically think our chances of walking away from this alive are?" They are at the top of their power levels, however. Fairies are not known for being outrageously dangerous. Clearly, they are more fond of using others to do their dirty work. We pulled into the only gas station that was thankfully open in the middle of the night and switched spots. I was able to doze in and out of a light sleep. I think the exhaustion came a little easier now that I didn't think I was walking straight into my death. Ryder wouldn't lie to me about something like that. And though our bond was gone, there was no denying that we cared deeply for each other. Once, when I woke up in a groggy state, I stared at his fingers wrapped around the wheel and wondered what it would look like if he wore a wedding band. Perhaps it was werewolf tradition, but the idea sure seemed nice. All of the warm and fuzzy feelings left me when I saw the sign for Valemount in the early morning sun. The mood in the car shifted. I sat up straighter. Ryder shut off the radio to listen to the GPS instructions. Weight fell onto both of us, heavy and thick. This little town held some beautiful memories. The high right before the crash. B section. I started showing signs of wolf, drain, so slight I had thought nothing of it. And here they were. I had given them years of my life. We pulled into a long, gravel driveway that wove up a hillside. I want to go in alone, I announced. I expected Ryder to argue, but he just shrugged and put the car in park. We sat at the base of a turn, only able to see a little of the white siding between the branches of the trees. He would be close enough to hear me scream if I needed him. But I wanted to confront them myself. Maybe we had gotten it wrong. Maybe they would tell me the truth if Ryder was with me. I had seen his temper flare. I knew he was the most inviting when he had violence on his mind. He handed me a small knife. It won't do much good if they try to use their glamour on you, but at least you won't be going in empty-handed. It'll be right here if you need me. I swallowed and took the knife, putting it into a pant pocket before slipping out of the car. The long walk up the driveway seemed to take forever. The home inched closer, looking so much like the home they had in my little mountain town. Did they host meetings out of this one too? Did they hold up pictures of dead werewolf hunters here as well? I knocked on the door. This could be nothing. This could be some massive misunderstanding. Dawn opened the door, but it was not the Dawn I knew. Her cheeks were free of wrinkles, smooth and youthful. Her hair was perfectly sleek and luminous, though still very gray. Eyes young and sparkling with life, and poking from her silvery hair were tall, pointed gazelle horns. "Georgia," she whispered. There was a blank. Then she opened her arms as if to welcome me. I stumbled back a step. "So it is true," I gasped, unable to tear my eyes away from the towering horns. She jerked back as if I had slapped her. "Georgia, sweetheart." Her voice was soothing and melodic. Then I understand. Her horns disappeared. Her cheeks sagged with age, crow's feet lining her eyes. "My dear, are you all right? Where have you been? We've been so worried about you." She stepped forward again, moving to embrace me again, now that her cover was restored. Lies. It had all been lies. And I was just being slapped in the face with all of it. "You have not been worried about me," I hissed. "You have never cared about me or Milo or anyone else. Have you? Georgia, what are you talking about?" She murmured. "Are you quite all right? Are you experiencing wolf drain? Wolf drain doesn't come from wolves." I snarled. My words were venomous, but my gestures were cowardly. I kept slipping further and further backwards as she inched forward. This was the person I trusted. This was the person I had given up my life for. I had believed every lie that had come out of her mouth. Her husband's words were law. She was the warm comfort that came after the whip. And now she had horns. "Georgia, you're talking crazy," she soothed. "What's going on?" Armond burst out of the home. "Jesus, is that Georgia?" He didn't have his glamour on. His ears were pointed at the ends. "Get the gun," Dawn said flatly. "What?" Armond sputtered. "She knows. We have to put her down, like a fucking dog." They were talking about me like I was a farm animal, used and now needing to be disposed of. Armond moved fast, faster than I had ever seen. He was gone before I even had the knife in my hand. But Dawn was right there, staring at me. She had hugged me when I cried. She smoothed my hair and convinced me everything would be all right when I feared that everything was crumbling beneath my feet. And now, she was ordering that I be shot. The knife was flung from my hand, not my first choice of weapon, or even my second. If I had been Milo, it would have landed square in her eye. But I was not Milo, and I was not at my peak hunting form. The knife was embedded in her thigh. A scream tore through the air just as Armond reappeared. "What are you waiting for?" Dawn screamed, ripping the knife out of her thigh. "Shoot her." A rumbling snarl answered from behind me. I didn't know when he had gotten out of the car. I didn't know how he knew I needed him so soon. But I was grateful. Grateful and horrified and completely useless with no weapons left to defend myself. "We will void the treaty." Armond choked out. "She is a hunter. No one will come for her, and they will just assume that she killed the wolf. We will not be tied to it. Shoot them both." "Fuck, shoot them, you fool." Ryder lunged while I was frozen in fear. He was a flash of teeth and sharp claws, moving for Dawn. His jaws dove for her side, going for the vital organs. Armond swung the barrel of the gun from me to Ryder. There was a noise from behind me, a flap like a thick blanket being caught in the wind. Now. Let's not be hasty. We don't know just who is watching. Now do we?" A silky voice purred. And behind me, there was Max, the tall vampire. And behind him, looking like hundreds of little leaves, were bats, all of them hanging upside down, their little eyes focused on the scene before their leader. Chapter 83. I wanted to ask 1,000 things on the drive. I didn't even know where we were going or who Ryder had called just after he bound and gagged the two fairies. I pretended not to notice the way Ryder snarled in Dawn's face when she whispered something under her breath. There was an edge to him that I seldom saw, and I hated that I liked it right now. I hated that I envisioned him shifting back into his wolf and ripping at her throat. But I was numb, beyond numb. And sometimes, when I allowed myself a second of clarity and realized that I was in a vehicle with not only a werewolf, but also a vampire who indeed could turn into a bat and to fairies who had once been people I trusted with my life, then I would stab my fingers into my temples and will the numbness to return to me. The only thing that mattered was the next step, and the one after that. Max the Bat, shifting vampire, also rode in the vehicle with us. At one point, I asked him if his companions would be okay without a ride, and he simply stared at me so hard that I worried he was going to burn a hole through my skin. Maybe that was a vampire trait I wasn't aware of yet. Max said something about it smelling like Dawn was bleeding a lot. When I glanced over at Ryder, he didn't pull his gaze away from the road. "I don't give a fuck if she bleeds out. I will not be held accountable." A werewolf hunter, someone from their own organization, found out the truth and acted out of self-defense when they threatened her with a gun. You were witness to that. No treaties had been crossed. If she dies like this, then she dies by her own hand. Max didn't argue. So we drove and drove. No music. No chatter. The mountain range that seemed to last forever and touch the sky shifted and changed. Sometimes, it would become more rigid snow-covered peaks dominating the scene, other times it softened. And when a winding river came into view, I knew where we were. Kamploops. Audrey lives here. She runs something that would be close to a human prison. Sensing that I had no idea who he was talking about, he added, "She was the person leading the conference. Just a wind howler by birth, but wasn't born with traditional powers. She nominated herself as something of a jailor." I swallowed hard, nodding my head. Audrey was as lovely as I remember her being. She was all legs with that easy elegance that I thought only supermodels could possess. Even though it looked like she had just returned from a mid-day workout, she was as stunning as ever. "Hello," she greeted, descending the front steps of a massive building with fluidity. I couldn't quite call the building a complex, just like I couldn't quite call it a home. Daunting and large, but not quite corporate. Far from anything I would call a prison. We spoke on the phone, And you made some great accusations for being a werewolf outside of the royal family, she stated, though it was on an unfriendly tone. There was something sharp to it. As pretty as she wasn't afraid of using verbal daggers. Or maybe real ones. Who knew? When accusations were made against my royals, they were taken into custody until further notice. I don't believe that this should be any different, Ryder stated flatly, while Max stood and stretched and I tried to wrap my brain around how this very human-looking man could turn into something so small. Ryder grabbed a hold of Armond's arm and yanked him out of the back seat. The powerful fairy fell into the dirt face down. But as soon as he was out in the open air and saw that he had an audience, he started yelling, "This is absurd. This goes against all of our laws and agreements. How can you treat a fellow supernatural like this? Do you know that I am the highest among the fairies? I know exactly who you are. And sure, this will go to court." His gaze turned to Adrienne, unlike I had ever seen it. Dead. Certain. I wondered if this was the man who killed my fellow hunters. I wondered if this distant, an amused face was the last one they saw. There was certainly something terrifying about it. You making this accusation does not mean that your beloved royals will be set free. Ryder, I hope you can understand that. And though I was not born with powers for my kind, do not think that I cannot make you beg for death. Adrienne warned. Ajax and Keiko are not my concern. He was a little gentler. Get Dawn out of the SUV, but not much, though he helped her out and onto her feet. Her injured leg could not support her. Ryder let her crumple to the ground. Adrienne winced at the sight of all the blood, then glanced at Max. "Only human blood for me." "Thank you," the vampire said, turning up his nose. "And can I ask what involvement you have in all of this?" Adrienne demanded. Max grinned as if delighted by her question. A slender hand gestured to me. Ryder called me to bear witness to a little werewolf hunter almost losing her life. And when Ryder came to defend her, they were willing to kill him too. Not terribly conducive to all those laws. "Dear Armond," Max purred. The vampire was still smiling when he returned his attention to the jailor. "And if you don't believe me, feel free to ask the 100 other vampires I brought with me to witness it." Adrienne stilled for a moment. It must have been quite a sight. A vacant girl who was reeling, 2 powerful fairies groaning and rolling about, a vampire, a werewolf, all standing before her, claiming that the very fabric that kept the peace was being torn apart. A werewolf hunter, she finally managed. "That's me," I piped up. My voice felt like it was not my own, crawling out of my throat. "You hunt werewolves, yet ended up at a fairy's home, and they wanted to kill you. Are you aware that Ryder is a werewolf?" She wondered. "I'm very aware of what Ryder is," I promised. "We were mated, which is how I came to understand the werewolf culture. But that was after we tried to kill each other a couple of times. Because I was groomed to be a hunter, and these 2 are the people who created an entire army of humans who were so angry and so hurt that they wanted to eradicate all werewolves." Adrienne stared at me for a moment. Hard. Then, she sighed. "Let's get these 2 inside and cleaned up. Once they are taken care of, I think I need you guys to go back a few dozen steps. And maybe after that, I'll need a few stiff drinks." Chapter 84. We told Adrienne everything once Armond and Dawn were tucked away and wrapped in gauze and bandages. Ryder let out a little noise of disapproval when he saw how nice the accommodations were for the vile pair. Despite the locks on the door and windows and the supposed magic suppressant pumped into the air in said rooms, it looked nice. Not a luxury hotel, but maybe a mid-tier one. The 2 bastards still screamed and cried about their unfair treatment the entire time, even after they were looked over by an staff medic for a second time. 2 hours of talking later, and we finally left to head to a department store. I had no idea what I truly expected out of this escapade, but it clearly hadn't been an overnight stay. I purchased a cheap pair of leggings, a thick hoodie, and a toothbrush. I had never been so grateful to return to a 3-star hotel in my life. No magic, no knives, No guns, no screaming. I think I'm going to take the longest shower of my life. I stated. Can I join you? I quirked an eyebrow, too tired for more words. He just whispered, please. We both stripped out of our dirty, dusty clothes and climbed into the small shower tub combo. I hogged the water as gentle fingers started at my neck, tracing their way down my arms, over my hands, settling on my hips. The sickly, soul-sucking feeling that had kept me vacant for the majority of the day ebbed away when I watched his bare chest shudder with a breath. You're okay, right? He whispered. I told you I was okay before. I assured. I know what you said. He murmured into the humid air. But you had a gun pointed at you today. If I had been a second later, I had. And not only that, but the man holding it had been someone I cared for, someone I looked up to, a person that I had trusted with my life, was prepared to put me down. I would have been shot if Ryder hadn't stepped in. I would have let myself be shot if Ryder hadn't stepped in because I had spent my life being a killer. But I had never imagined this. I'm okay. I'm not the one who ended up with a knife in her leg and almost bleeding out in the back of a car. I stated, trying to sound confident as I ran my fingers through Ryder's dark. So care. I shouldn't have let you get out of the car by yourself. I didn't really know what I expected, but I thought that you guys were close. I thought you worked for them for years. How could you kill someone that you knew that closely, regardless of what they have done to werewolves? How could they hurt someone who was so loyal to them? It was odd to think about now, but it was true. I was loyal to them, obviously to a fault. When the gun had been pulled on me, I had just stared. I had been frozen, because I thought that there was no way he could have pulled the trigger, even though they lied to me about who they were, even though I knew in my soul that they were responsible. There was no way. I'm all right. I promise. Look at me, I said. His silver eyes met mine as his lower lip trembled. I thought I was going to lose you, George. I thought I was going to lose you all over again. I held him while he shook. And when I started to shake as well, his grip around my waist was tight and reassuring. I don't know who started crying first. It didn't matter. I was there for him, he was there for me. He shampooed my hair for me. I laughed when he got suds in my despite how much it stung. He closed his eyes and leaned into my touch when I stretched up on my toes to run conditioner through his hair. He gave me a shaky grin while we toweled it off. We ordered room service, Ryder insisting that using Ajax's card was not fraud. I didn't care enough to argue, nor did I really think that the king would give a damn. My soggy nachos and his greasy burger were left mostly untouched, but the food helped add some normalcy to the disaster. When we began drifting off to sleep, he stroked my hair gently. I don't know if I'm dreading facing them tomorrow or if I'm excited to finally get some answers. I don't know either, I confessed, nestling into his chest a little more. But this is nice, and I want to focus on this right now. It didn't matter how much either of us wanted to stay in this limbo. Tomorrow came anyway. Adrienne was impossible to read when we let ourselves into her domain. I couldn't tell if she was off-put by my badly fitting clothing or if it was the entire situation at hand. Her slender arms were folded over her chest. Her eyes narrowed on us. How was your evening? Busy, thanks to you. Interview after interview. Follow-up after follow-up. She complained. And how did it all go? X validated every detail of your claims. I also selected a few of his bats at random to interview as well. They all lined up almost perfectly. I'm waiting on a report from my men on the girl you claim to have this wolf, Drain, and that boy that you told me about as well. Milo will really only know about Dawn and as werewolf hunters. I chimed in. He'll be a good contact, but he might be a little unwilling to talk. I was exactly gentle with him when I was trying to figure out Dawn and Armond's location. Adrienne studied me for a moment. A weaker version of me might have squirmed under her gaze. But now, a strong woman glancing me over was nothing. I still cannot believe that you used to hunt werewolves. I cannot believe that you were convinced that those creatures were capable of harming humans. They're too busy fighting amongst themselves to go after anyone else. If it is the role that I had to play for this awful mess to come to light, then so be it, I said, but my stomach twisted with unease. I was responsible for enough blood to drown myself in it. She lifted her chin ever so slightly, and I thought the corner of her mouth rose just a pinch. Well then, that's mighty noble of you. And you're right. Whatever is going on has certainly been pulled out of the shadows. But with the magic suppressants in the air, the fairies aren't able to use their glamour as readily and therefore aren't able to lie. You say it like it's a bad thing, Ryder said warily. Adrienne hummed to herself, squeezing out the juice of her lemon slice into her steaming cup of tea. If they are unable to lie, they have simply decided that it's best not to speak at all. We have a fair amount of evidence against him, but they aren't defending themselves or damning themselves at this point. So, this is getting stagnant now, Ryder ground out. A single night is hardly long enough for anything to go stale. She huffed, but it was enough time for the council to decide that there is enough against them to take more extreme measures. I've heard through the grapevine that you have a lovely enforcer. Noah, I believe. Noah won't do it. Noah won't do it, I blurted. I thought of the way his face twisted when Keiko ordered him to do certain vile things. He had done it. He followed the order, but he had been on the verge of vomiting the entire time. He hated every second of it, but I was the one he tortured. I'm not going to say that in practice or anything, but if you need someone to get their hands dirty, I can do it. Georgia Ryder began. These people might have had a role in killing my parents, I said firmly, and dozens of others. Even those who had ended up dead would be haunted for the rest of their lives. Hunters like Milo and I would see dead, vacant eyes staring us in our darkest nightmares. Then there were others like Cassie. I can do it. Ryder nodded his head once. I want the alchemist brought in too. We won't put our hands on him, but I have some suspicions. Chapter 85. I knew what I wanted done to Dawn and Armond immediately. Ryder blinked once when I told him, and some part of me wanted to be concerned about what he would think of me after this. That these people, these creatures, could have had a role in killing my parents. In fact, I was almost certain that they did. And if they did something to my parents, then they ruined the lives of countless others. They did not deserve mercy, and if I was the one strong enough and angry enough to deliver violence, then so be it. So I watched silently while Ryder stood on a chair, looping a thick rope through a hoop in the ceiling. For how pretty the rest of the building was. This room had no pretense about what it was. No windows, poor lighting, cement floors with a drain, so you could pressure wash the entire space and scrub out any evidence. I was sure. Armond slunk into the room, Adrienne gripping his arm. He didn't protest too much when Ryder took over, pulling the man's arms behind his back. I knew the position well, and just seeing it was enough to make the pain pulse down the length of my arms. If it worked on me and Milo, it would work on them. A protest crawled up my throat. I was being cruel. I was being unjust. I had no right to do this. Then Dawn came into the room. Her hair was dirty and covering a portion of her face. She snarled insults at Adrienne. Thankfully, the wind howler looked entirely unbothered and dumped the fairy in the room. And I saw the horns that were sprouting from her head. Horns that hadn't been visible to me when she wrapped her arms around me, comforting me in the assisted living facility. And she had been the one who sent us to hunt the werewolves while being a magical creature herself. Wolf drain aside. She had blood on her hands. Now what? Sit down. Dawn, I ordered. Her chin ticked up, tipping those elegant horns back. You think that you can order me about? She hissed. I think me giving you simple instructions is the least of your problems. I murmured. The words coated in a softness that I didn't feel. If Ryder could tie Armond up, I could handle Dawn. She sat down on a chair that looked like it had served more than its time at a kitchen table decades ago, when it didn't crack under her weight. I took the remaining cord from Ryder and wound it around her wrists. She glared fiercely at me, but didn't protest otherwise. How do you want to start? Ryder prompted again. My attention settled heavily on Armond. The cold bastard. when I whispered, "Shift." "What?" "Shift. I want you in your wolf form." I repeated, a quick scan of my features as if looking for doubt. Then, just then, he bowed his head in a brief nod. He discarded his shirt and shoes to save them from being shredded, but sacrificed his pants. A quick roll of the shoulders and a sucked-in breath. Then, the man I loved was a brilliant black wolf. I turned to the woman I had trusted with my entire world. "Tell me how awful the wolves are. Tell me how they destroy human beings." I snarled. She said nothing. She wouldn't even look at me, watching her partner instead. So, without tearing my gaze from her, I said to Ryder, "Start slowly. We want this to take a while." It was hard to know if Ryder followed my instructions. I think the first scream from Armond was the loudest. Even I cowed and helped but flinch while Dawn remained perfectly unbothered before me. Regardless of what I felt and what I wanted to be, pain was pain, and there was humanity in that. She watched on, though not an ounce of expression on her features. Her eyes were focused, not glazed, but there was nothing in her. "Keep going," I said to Ryder, and I kept watching Dawn. So one little bite or scratch from a werewolf on her partner's body wouldn't make her crack. I supposed it was only fair. From what little I knew about fairies, I doubted that this woman was as young as she appeared. Was she hundreds of years old? If so, I was going to find out just how many screams it would take to make her crack. I didn't know how long we went for. It would be a snarl from Ryder followed by a shout or cry from Armond. I would let the cycle repeat about 5 times before I would glance over my shoulder. The first glance I saw at Armond close. The second glance was when I saw blood on the fairy man. The third is when the blood now coated Ryder's mouth. His head low, long tail stiff. How long would it take for the blood to trickle down into the drain? "Want to keep going?" I whispered to Dawn, grinning a little. "And not afraid of you, human. You can't kill us," she murmured back, her voice almost sweet. "We aren't fickle like humans. Our rulers are treasured and valued. If you kill us, they'll come after you, and they will do much worse than whatever silly game this is. They might think they can come after me, but I don't think they'll want to come after an army of animals like him." I nodded my head towards Ryder. I felt the manic smile on my lips grow a little bit with every second that passed. "Besides, killing you would be no fun, would it?" A scream tore through the air, punctuating my question beautifully. They went back and forth for a long time. I became in tune with it. A growl from Ryder, a shriek from Armond, a threat from Dawn. I just stared at her, smiling a little. It was when the screaming stopped that I turned my attention around again. Blood was everywhere. In Ryder's fur, on the floor, inching towards the drain, soaking what was left of Armond's clothes. Vile bite marks covered his body, the punctures from the teeth deep bleeding. An entire chunk of flesh was missing from the fairy's side. He must have been in unbearable pain, but I wondered if we had gone too far. His eyes rolling back in his head, his body swaying until he pulled against the ropes holding him upright. "I think we're done with him now," I said to Ryder, regardless of whether the human within him had come to the same conclusion. The outer wolf snarled, silver eyes flashing. I knew that he would listen. I didn't doubt that there would be hell to pay if we accidentally killed one of them. We might have been justified, but the less consequences that came out of it, the better. There was no visible change in Dawn after the announcement. No relief like I expected. I still couldn't decide if she was impeccable at hiding any sliver of feeling or if she really was just this heartless. Regardless of their relationship. Regardless if they were together romantically or just ruled together. She watching him be tortured, torn apart truly, and hadn't batted an eye so far. "Your nails are so pretty," I stated, cocking my head a little to get a better look at her long fingers. The nails were coated in a pearly pink polish that was so subtle. I almost didn't notice it was there. "Ryder, I think it's time that we let poor Armond sit down and have a little chat with dearest Dawn." Ryder stayed in his wolf form, which meant that I had to get involved. I knew that I should have been feeling some kind of aversion. I should have been fighting while trying to claw its way out of my throat. I should have felt nauseous, should have been concerned about all of the blood and gore that I was seeing. But I had a purpose and my mind was only filled with the next step in the process, and I, Armond, wiped the blood off my hands on my pants. And I, Dawn, tied her back up where Armond was strung up, but I just found her in front of her. Such a brave little wolf hunter. Dawn purred in my face. Do you want to tell him how you killed all those wolves? Do you want to tell your wolf how you looked in the face of his brothers and sisters and struck them down? Come on, Huntress. You were so proud of your kill ratio. Why not share it? I didn't allow my gaze to even flicker towards Ryder. He knew. I told him everything he needed to know, and he had seen me in action. Her tactic wouldn't make me falter. I couldn't. Do you want to tell him how you trained me so damn well? Do you want to tell him how you found me outside of a hospital? I countered. She said nothing. I let her stew in the moment, leaving for a brief second to gather some supplies, namely a pair of pliers. I saw dear Audrey and briefly and asked her if the small cameras in the room were indeed hooked up and functional. She assured me they were. If she was worried about the instrument hands, she said nothing. Ryder was pacing when I returned to the room, his gaze focused on Armond. When he saw the pliers in my hand, he paused for a brief second. My focus didn't let me consider what he was thinking. I would get this done one way or another. Dawn tipped her chin up as she watched me approach. Are you and your partner behind this wolf drain bullshit? I asked. Her lips stayed pressed together stubbornly. The first nail was pulled out, nightmarish and messy. The phantom pain coiled around me, but I pulled and pulled, never letting my grip loosen, until it gave way. She wailed, Tell me why you wanted us to hunt the werewolves. I demanded. Tears were gleaming in her eyes. Her skin had grown pale immediately, but she said nothing. The second nail was cleaner, but still violent and awful. The noise that came out of her was even worse. It started with King Archer. It took me a moment to place the voice because it certainly hadn't come from Dawn. She was panting hard and sweat was starting to show on her forehead. Shut up. You idiot. She hissed through clenched teeth. Armond didn't listen. The treaty prevented us from ever touching the wolves. We needed the humans in between. We cowed and do it ourselves. Shut up. Dawn screamed. I ignored her. So where did the wolf drain come from? His partner's rough barks had gotten to him. His eyes flickered to her. Stalling. I gripped Dawn's hand hard, getting a hold of her third nail. I stared at Armond, unwavering. Where did wolf drain come from? I repeated. Chapter I Texas. It was a lie. It was all a lie. I had fought. Many had died. Dozens more had been taken advantage of. And for nothing. Because none of it was true. I stared at the blood on the floor for a moment, my mind quiet and racing all at once. Did I curl up on the floor and weep? Did I find a blade and slit their throats now? What did you say? I whispered to Armond, slowly turning around to face him. There was no denying that he was looking sickly. The way he was slumped forward made it seem like he was on the verge of vomiting. Was it because of the pain? The blood loss? The vision of seeing his partner have her fingernails torn from her hands, listening to her screams. His chest rose and fell with a weak breath. I moved quickly, whirling around to grab Dawn's hand again. I would make him fucking squeal. I didn't care what it took. I didn't care what I turned into. Wolf Drain was a joint effort. Armond wheezed again. I didn't glance at him or give up my grip on Dawn's hand. The plier lifted. A joint effort between who? You two. I pressed. Us fairies and the alchemists. The alchemists that have almost gone extinct. Aside from one. I clarified. Dawn's mouth quirked up at that like I had said something hilarious. I wondered if punching her solidly in the stomach would be enough to get the smile off her face. But if having her like this was going to get Armond talking, I was going to change what I was doing. Yes, us and them. Armond croaked. I want you to tell me exactly what is going on. I ordered. If you stop talking at any point, I'm going to start ripping out nails. We don't have too many left. Maybe after that, it'll just start taking off the fingers. Don't fucking say anything. Dawn howled. How noble of you, I murmured, smiling at her. All these years, I thought you were the kind one. But now, I get to see you for what you really are. You weren't ever so kind. You never really cared. You just wanted to win. No matter what, no matter what, no matter who you stepped out. It was just easier to bend us all to your wishes when you were nice and sweet. Armond, get talking. And he did. He explained everything. It started with King Archer and King Leo. When they won the war, the fairies were furious but had no choice but to agree to sign the treaty with them. That treaty still stands. We are not to kill a single wolf. But it was unfair. It always has been. The shifters are overpowered, with destined mates, heightened sense, and the ability to transform into animals. Their power was not as old tales would make it seem. After we exterminate the Werewolves Armond, Dawn shrieked. I watched the fairy's features falter for a second. His partner had struck doubt in him. I didn't dare allow it to bloom. I grabbed hold of a nail and pulled, and pulled, and pulled. Then, it released. Dawn screamed. Armond shuddered. You killed the Werewolves, I asked. It was almost impossible to keep the snarl from my voice. The humans killed the Werewolves. Dawn hissed through bloody teeth. She must have bit her cheek or tongue in an effort to stop her shouts, just like the humans killed the werewolves. I summarized. And all you had to do was give the humans a cause. A reason to go kill werewolves. To be honest, humans are so afraid of what they don't understand. I'm surprised you had to do more than tell them about werewolves just existing. But, of course, you went further. You created Wolf, Drain. What I want to know is how. I turned to Armond, lowering my brows. Talk. The alchemists did it. They came to us and claimed they had a potion that would hurt humans with magic that looked similar to that of the werewolf. Not that it mattered. The scared humans cowled and see the magic patterns, but they went after the werewolves anyway. Just like I had. I had been sobbing over my parents, and when I had been given a cause to rally against, I hadn't questioned it. I took up arrow after arrow, assignment after assignment. How did you pick which humans to target? At random, as long as they had young and strong family members. Fuck. I hadn't even mattered. They hadn't chosen me because of anything in particular. In fact, they might have been hoping for Craig to be the one who took up the axe. Not me. They might have drugged a dozen individuals and I was just the one that was dumb enough to fall for it. Dumb enough to throw my life away. Dumb enough to carry that bow into the woods with me. Something brushed against my leg. Ryder's wolf nudged against me, silver eyes shone up at me. Unwavering strength against the side of my shaking leg. It might have never been about me in the beginning. I might have just started out as one of the unlucky ones. But they had brought their war to the wrong woman. And I was here to end it. So you sent me on to the royals' land in the hopes that I could kill them. You'd keep your hands clean. And a civil war would start as the battle for new royalty so you could reduce their numbers. I summarized. Did you cook your wolf? Drain potion into every single item at the CF? Have you secretly been poisoning entire towns every time you set up shop? No, the potion is effective, but incredibly expensive to produce. We can't waste it. So it hadn't been an accident that some cinnamon buns with the poison had ended up in my freezer or in my stomach. And it hadn't been an accident that killed my parents. It had all been intentional. And I might have never known if Ajax hadn't eaten them. Hell, witch. Hell, if I hadn't been mated to a werewolf, I probably would have been dead already or living out the rest of my days as a zombie. When the trembling in my body got worse, Ryder leaned against me a little more. I set one hand down on the top of his head, ignoring the stickinces of the leftover blood. We're done here, I said, my voice softening with weakness. There were still questions that needed to be answered. Dozens, and with every new answer would come a rabbit hole of queries. But I couldn't do this to myself anymore. I couldn't let myself become a person who tortured beyond reason, even if there was something to gain. I couldn't be like them. We had gotten enough evidence. I was sure of it. I left the two of them bound and called for Adrienne. She appeared in a matter of seconds, her lips pressed into a grim line. Distribute the tapes to whoever you need to. And you're probably going to want someone with a medical background looking them over. Adrienne didn't protest. Just told me that there were change rooms on the main floor and that she had found some clothes for me to use. I didn't have to ask why, and I didn't allow myself to look down either. I had become what I needed to be out of necessity. I would not be ashamed, and I would not be horrified, but that also meant that I wouldn't think too hard about it right now. I showered numbly, telling myself that I was in a local gym and had just completed a grueling workout. That was all. I tossed my old clothes in a garbage can and pulled on the clothes that had been provided for me. The pants were too large, hanging off my hips and needing to be pulled up after a few steps. The shirt was too small, digging into my armpits and almost becoming sheer over my small breasts. But they were clean. Ryder was waiting for me in the hallway, his hair wet from the shower and his clothes obviously borrowed as well. Neither of us said anything. His arms wound around my frame, pulling me tight. I clung to his back, nestling my head against his shoulder. It was all going to be okay. It was all going to be all right. Even if it didn't feel that way right now. Even if it didn't feel that way for a long time. Are you okay? Ryder asked shakily. He eased me back so he could cup my face in his hands. I think so. Are you? He nodded and pulled me back and against his chest. Chapter 87. The fallout of our discoveries was immense. I didn't know much about the supernatural world as I had barely dipped my toes in, but when we returned to the Royals' vacation cabin, the phone calls didn't stop. Ryder was on his phone often, and though he would leave the room to take the calls, he never withheld information when I asked. The alchemist had confessed. In fact, they had never gone extinct at all. Ryder explained to me that reproduction was incredibly hard on them and most supernatural species. While the Shapeshitters had been given predetermined mates and had relative ease reproducing with humans, the same could not be said for the others. So, the alchemist saged and passed away without having children rather often. The gene pool was getting smaller. It had been easy enough to make the last handful of them seemingly disappear for a few years while they worked on their potion and poisons. Just another ploy to point a finger at the werewolves. They wanted to kill out all the Shapeshitters. Orcus had been the first victim. Werewolves the second. Lord only knew if they had progressed to working on the killing of vampires. Once the vampires were gone, the power would have gone back into the remaining species. The ability to shift. The chance at predestined mates might have been given to the remaining species. And even if it didn't, at least those that they had been envious of would be long dead. The little alchemist that seemed so frail and damaged had been none of those things. And the shimmering that I had seen was no reaction to stress. I had avoided the refreshment table. Others had not. They had not seen the glamour that the fairies had placed around Nigel in an effort to make his statement more believable. Anyone who had consumed food or drink at the event had been subjected to a potion of sorts. When they heard the sweet man talk, they hadn't been in control of their emotions. They believed when they should have questioned. Their hearts ached when they should have been doubtful. Ajax and Keiko had not fought as hard as they should have, under the spell like everyone else. But they couldn't have put up more of a fight in a room filled with glamour-ed individuals. They would have been suffocated by accusations. The ripple in the supernatural world was tangible, with two species working together. Things that should have been impossible became reality. Glamoring other species should have been inconceivable. But there it was. A consumable potion made with fairy magic and alchemists know how. Max the vampire stopped by once or twice. I can admit to being so stricken that I didn't really process his visits too much. But I knew that he was on our side, and knew that he had made statement after statement to help push our case. I do recall the way he looked at me, though. He cocked his head to one side and asked. I was astonished to hear that they survived. How did you not kill them? I shrugged absently. Didn't seem worth it at the time. Really? I would have gladly spent a few hundred years in a jail cell if it meant killing someone like that. When I went back to give a few statements to Adrienne, I debated doing it myself. It seemed easier to give up hundreds of years when one actually had the opportunity. I had given up so much of my life. I had dedicated day after day to them through everyday tasks. I hadn't eaten a meal without thinking about the effect on a hunt. I hadn't skipped the gym without berating myself. I hadn't gone to bed at night without thinking of my parents. You can live in anger forever, if you let yourself. I mused. I guess. For me, I just needed to move on. Another knock at the door paused the conversation. Whatever the vampire was going to say next died in his mouth. I just sank into the overstuffed chair and listened to Ryder at the door. Milo. Hey. Can I come in? The hunter asked. I jerked upright immediately, watching the man who trained me slink into the room. Eyes down. Then, in a flurry of movement, Max rose to his feet. His eyes were wide, lips parted. Well, the hell. The vampire cleared his throat. Best be on my way. Seems like you two still have a lot going on. He rushed out the door, leaving Milo to gawk after him. Do I even want to know what he is? The hunter asked in a hushed whisper. Probably not. I sighed. I should have gotten up to hug him. We had gone through this together, even though it was separate. I had been through the process every step of the way. He got thrown in the deep end at the finale, but regardless, what we had dedicated our entire beings to had turned out to be nothing but a sham. Still, I remained seating, my body feeling so heavy. I feel like I should apologize, but I also feel like you two need to apologize, Milo said, brow furrowed. In fairness, mild confusion in this scenario was entirely fair. What are we apologizing for? I held up a hand to quiet him, still so defensive, still so deep in all of it. Not that I could blame him. We had seen each other do awful things. We had been through awful things. It was only natural at this point, but Milo was not at the head of all of this. I'm sorry that I tried to choke you. I'm sorry that you were my contact point in all this. You didn't deserve a lot of the things that happened to you, and that's not fair. I could have handled many moments a lot better. But I'm also really grateful that this is all done, and part of me doesn't really care how we got here. Milo blinked at me, then nodded once. Right? Well, that about covers it then. I'm not going to say that any of it was okay, but I'm sorry too. You've always been a fabulous hunter, and I would have trusted you with my life in the field. But what I really needed to show you that trust, I didn't. How could you? I said around a yawn. Everything you believed was a lie. I fought it like hell at the beginning too. He cleared his throat awkwardly. Right? Well, where are your beloved royals? On their way. Ryder gritted out. I wish that I could wrap my arms around him. Let him lay his head against me like all those times when the mate bond was still intact. I could have soothed so much away. I could have sped up his healing. But now, neither of us could accelerate anything. We had to work through this disaster on our own time. Ajax and Keiko are coming from the facility they were held at. Keiko Westmon is flying up their daughter Clementine. But you got a little while before the big family reunion. Milo relaxed a little after that. He settled himself on a couch for a little while and even cracked a joke at Ryder's expense. Ryder didn't seem to notice, the glare on his features remaining the same. There's a cure, I blurted a moment later, almost an afterthought, or perhaps something more repressed, because there was a cure, but I had been too early for it. The cure that could have taken away my wolf, Drain, and left me mated to Ryder. And now, I was just a human, helplessly in love with a werewolf. For wolf, Drain? Milo asked. Yes, the alchemist said as much when we were at the conference together, but so much happened that I kind of let it go. I explained. Milo dropped his head into his hands, pressing his fingers into his temples. After he completed the circles, he said, Jesus Christ, this is all so much to take in. I feel like I don't even understand the words you're saying. Like, how can an alchemist even be a real thing? Or those other things, night howlers, like what is that? Wind howlers. I corrected automatically. But there is a cure. Milo, we can still save so many people. We can go to Cassie and treat her. Your family can be treated. Armond and Dawn aren't talking now that they aren't being actively tortured, but the alchemist is squealing. He told the council a list of names he believes were targets to their potions. We can help everyone. No more feeling helpless. Unless it was feeling helpless about those who couldn't be helped. Those that it was already too late for. But just because I couldn't get my parents back didn't mean that life stopped for everyone. Chapter 88, I was the one to give Sassy the cure. Everyone was as optimistic as they were wary. The cure had been provided by the alchemists who had been taken to a detention facility. Unlike the fairies who had little idea of what their leaders were doing. Almost all the alchemists had been compliant with Dawn and Armond's wishes. The greed was strong enough for them to throw away an eternity. And it might have been so strong that this was not the end of the war. Milo had announced that he would be the first to take a dose of the wolf drain cure. Ajax just rolled his eyes and pointed out that we would never know if it even worked. The risk he would be taking had no reward. I suggested Cassie. And though Ryder had been worried about what her family would think, I knew better. I knew the desperation. I knew the grief and the exhaustion. And I knew what a little bit of hope could do. When I showed up at their door after days of driving, they didn't hesitate to invite me in. I explained that we worked together and that I couldn't guarantee anything. But I might have had something to help their daughter. It was all eager nods and little gasps of hope. I did my best not to wince at the sight of Cassie before administering a dose, while I held her head back to help her swallow. I wondered if she knew me. I wondered if she was frightened. How much of her days she could actually remember. I stayed with her family while we waited. I had never met either of them before, and I didn't know if they were parents or relatives or just people who loved her enough to care for her. But just a pinch of hope was enough prompting to get them to feed me a mountain of cookies and fill my mug up with acidic coffee over and over again. I was there for hours. I witnessed some trembling tears, heard awful tales, nodded along sympathetically when needed. Everything I was hearing from them was the same story I had heard over and over again. One day she was fine. Then slowly, things started to slip away from her. Just like the first ones in her family to be affected by the wolf drain. They feared that it was genetic, that they were next door, that someone else would also become a burden to them. I'm too scared to go check. The woman croaked. The risk of the hope fracturing was too much. I knew that pain so well. But what they didn't know is that we had a light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe this treatment hadn't worked. Maybe it was the alchemist's last stunt. But there would be a cure. Even if it had to be ripped out of someone. I can go look, I offered, already standing. I navigated my way through the home slowly. As much as I knew there was still hope on the horizon. I faltered just outside of her room. I had already lost so much. Even if we weren't close. I was sure I could bear losing her too. How many bodies could I see before I snapped? How many souls did I have to witness leaving this earth? But this was the start. Good, bad, or ugly, I had to cross this hurdle. I went into her room, and there was Cassie, turning her head to look at me. Huntress, she whispered, her voice so hoarse from the months of silence. Tears welled in my eyes. It's just Georgia now. I corrected gently. Then I stepped back into the hallway and said, come see her. I left shortly after that, giving her time to reconnect. I would have to explain everything to her, like all of the other hunters. She would be taken in and the royals would relay all the information. Ajax was a little too robust for the situation, so Keiko off and did most of the talking. Then, at the end, I would be called in so they could see me. I would tell them my entire truth. After that, we could only hope that they made the right decision. So far, we had been lucky. It was the alchemists and fairies who were not so lucky. The council would not be kind. Dawn and Armond might have thought that their war was worth it. They might have thought that giving their species destined mates and shapeshiftish abilities was worth every risk. But I wondered if being a cold, underground cell for the rest of their days was what they had envisioned. The greedy little alchemists who were dying out anyway rotted alongside them. only being granted special privileges when they released information or made antidotes for the abomination they created. At first, I had been angry. They didn't even have the courage to hunt wolves themselves. We had killed on their behalf. I had watched innocent wolves die all because I thought I was doing the right thing. But Ajax had seemed pleased with the outcome. When I grilled him about it, he just shrugged. I think an eternity of suffering is worse. Dawn and Armond are the rulers that took over immediately after the ones that fought with King Archer and King Leo centuries ago. They've been around for at least 100 years, and I think spending their last 100 in a cell while my people thrive is quite the punishment. They wanted more power, but all they got was more time to think about their actions. They'll know when new royals are elected in their place. They'll know just how discontent their people were. After that, I felt a little bit better. Chapter 89, I carried the Subaru with me through so many things. When my parents could no longer drive themselves, I had been relieved to have a vehicle at my disposal. It helped me care for them in some of the only ways I could at the time. Then, when I had started hunting and gained my own income, I kept the car. I kept it in the hopes that I could show my dad how well I had taken care of it when he got better. Then, I kept it so that I could think of the way my mom sat in the passenger seat with her hair fluttering in the wind. I remembered my dad replaying the same 6-seed ease on road trips. It was the thread that I clung to, the shirt that was stuffed in a closet. If I closed my eyes tight enough, I could make myself believe it still smelled like them. Now I was handing off the keys to some teen with acne and braces. He seemed delighted with the entire purchase and was unbothered by the ripped upholstery and the old stereo. I watched my old car slink away down a hill, out of my neighborhood. I expected to feel more. I expected tears to well in my eyes, and I told myself that I wouldn't be upset with my weakness if I cowed and let my keys go to someone else. Grief and loss were ugly and twisted. They were unpredictable in a way that occasionally made me want to sob in a grocery store when I saw a kind father smoothing his daughter's hair. But I just watched my car go and breathed a sigh of relief. It was done. My parents were dead. My life had been turned upside down and shaken about. The people I had trusted betrayed in a way I couldn't even fathom half the time. And since we moved away, the car was the last thing that I clung to from my old life. Releasing it was a breath of fresh air. I would have a hard time trusting anyone for a long time. I would doubt and question each and every word out of anyone's mouth for years to come. I would never live in my small mountain town again. I wouldn't be able to look at a cinnamon bun without becoming violently ill. I wouldn't have the relationship with my brother that I deserved to have. And my parents would stay dead regardless of how messed up my grieving period had been. Those were things I could not control, even though I desperately wanted to. But I didn't need a car to keep them close. They stayed with me and would sing little reminders in wafts of perfume. In a loud booming laugh, they would live on with me, long after the Subaru was in a scrapyard. I just didn't need to be weighed down anymore. How did it go, my love? Ryder asked when I came back into the house. Our house. He stood over the stove, a platinum band glinting on his finger while he stirred a pot of tomato sauce. It went all right, I answered, sipping onto a bar stool. Is the car gone? It is. And you're doing okay with that? I gave him a crook smile. For now. Who knows what I will feel tomorrow or the day after. But it was the right thing to do. Especially since Ajax bought me that new car. I had tried to refuse the king. A Volvo sedan was not a gift of gratitude that I expected. Then again, I hadn't expected the cute little bungalow that he purchased for us or the pack position he offered to Ryder. I had protested a little bit, but Ryder had silenced me gently. He reminded me that I had saved a community. I had fought for a species that was not my own, even when it meant turning against everything that I thought to be true. Ryder and I deserved this and so much more. We had lost what could never be replaced. Besides, if Milo could take a few grand towards his education and a trendy flat in a city center, then I could accept this. We can always sell it and get you a Forester or maybe an Impreza, Ryder suggested. I shrugged my shoulders, offering him a truer smile now. You know what? I think I might become a Volvo girl just yet. I complimented Ryder's tomato sauce every second that there was a spoon in my mouth.
He would never admit it.
But he liked the fawning. Now that he had a home to call his own, he had taken to domestic tasks. Something as simple as sweeping was thrilling to him, because this was finally his. No housekeepers coming at checkout. No more living out of a duffel bag and eating food that only required a microwave. He had his home now, and my home was wherever he went. I couldn't lie and say that everything had gotten better, that I could rely on him to be there when I woke up from nightmares. I could trust him to stand beside that I wrestled with the life that I had taken. He held my hand proudly when we were formally introduced to the pack, even when Ajax slipped that I was a former hunter. Even then, no one judged, though some asked general questions. This my reality now, and since the council had distributed press about the matter, it was quiet. Everyone knew what they needed to. Werewolves were no longer being hunted. Hunters were to be reported so they could be captured and educated if possible. Anyone with wolfed drain was to be treated quickly. New rulers had swept in for the fairy community, and even though they seemed lovely, they were being monitored heavily. The alchemists were working off their sentences slowly. I would be dead for decades before a single one of them was released. And I spent every night sleeping beside the man that I loved. Georgia, someone whispered, the voice feminine and fluid. I blinked my eyes, and panic clenched my chest. No. I could not be back here. That meant, no, don't worry. She hushed, tucking my pale hands into her own purple ones. Dear child, I didn't mean to frighten you. I have it again. Don't I? I choked out. Oh no, never again. But this is the only way I can reach you, and even then, it's taken several dozen attempts. I hope you aren't angry with me. Her black eyes shone with concern. Why am I here? I gasped. Because I called you to me. And finally, it worked. Do you know how much energy I have spent on you? She demanded, placing her hands on her hips. I said nothing, feeling like my heart was in my throat. Right. Well, now that you're here, I want to give you a gift. She whirled away from me, the low clouds that covered the floor swirling around her as she moved. There, on a small table, she picked up 2 marbles. I was devastated when you two were torn apart. Take this as a representation of my gratitude for all that you sacrificed. Slowly, she pressed the 2 marbles back together. I can't keep you here for long, but know that you have done my children a great service and that I am forever indebted to you. You and Ryder will always have my blessing. I jerked upright in the bed, gasping, his features barely visible in the early morning light. And when he looked at me, his eyes swam like mercury.